Hello, 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 hello. It's me, Logan Albright, again, here to review books for your viewing pleasure on YouTube. Are you ready? Here we go. All right, I got an interesting one for you guys today. I actually started reading this book 12 years ago and then didn't ever finish it and forgot about it. And I came back to it recently and I just finished it today. It is The Worm Ouroboros by E.R. Eddison. Of course, if you're not familiar with the term, the Worm Ouroboros is the serpent eating its own tail. It is a famous ancient symbol symbolizing eternity or repetition. There's endlessness, the serpent eating its own tail. It makes a ring. Kind of a wedding ring kind of thing almost. Pretty cool. Now, this is sort of an obscure book. I don't think most people have heard of it. It was published in 1922, and E.R. Eddison was an acquaintance of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, and he read his work to them, and they were impressed by it, but he was somewhat older than them, and his work was published a little bit earlier. I think this book is remarkable in that it sort of bridges the gap between Tolkien and everything that came before. Because before Tolkien, there wasn't really much of a fantasy genre. Before Tolkien, you had the Icelandic sagas, you had fairy tales, you had Arthurian legends, and you had works, kind of dreamlike works by people like Lord Dunsany and George MacDonald. I haven't talked about George MacDonald on this channel yet, but I'm going to at some point. The 19th century kind of dreamlike fantasy authors. But there was no real sword and sorcery fantasy until Tolkien. But E.R. Eddison is sort of a bridge between those things. He synthesizes all of those influences together into this book. It's written in a little bit of a deliberately archaic style. It's a little bit hard to read because of that, but it's very florid. It's like the definition of purple prose. It's got lots of big words. It's very old-timey, but it's very beautifully written at the same time. There's lots of colors. There's lots of descriptions. It's very evocative. And I think that's one of the things I really like about it is how just how the language just evokes this other world that he created. The book starts out with a framing device where there's a man talking to his wife, and he decides to sleep in the Lotus Room. I don't know what the Lotus Room is, and he's basically going to dream and be transported into this other world. And he's guided up to the planet Mercury by this bird. And he observes what happens on the planet Mercury, and that's the whole plot of the book. And the framing device completely disappears just a few chapters in, and you never hear from him again. It's sort of funny that way because we're meant to believe that we're seeing this through the eyes of this outside observer, but the action of the book takes place over 4 years, and you never hear about the outside observer again. So that's kind of strange. Ostensibly, the action takes place on Mercury, and there are all these different lands. There's Demon Land and Imp Land and Witch Land and Goblin Land and Pixie Land. And they're all different kingdoms, essentially. And the action of the book involves a war between Witch Land and Demon Land. Surprisingly, the Demon Land people are the good guys, the demons. They're not really demons. They're human-like people with horns. The actual races don't seem to be that different from one another. Certainly not the traditional understanding of pixies or goblins or things like that. But they all are occupying this land together, and there's a conflict going on between the witches and the demons, and that occupies the bulk of the book. Shortly before the action of the book commences, we are told that there was sort of a truce between all these people, and they got together to essentially genocide the ghouls. We hear about the ghouls. We don't know much about them, but they were apparently bad dudes, and everybody got together to drive them out of the land. But now the demons and the witches are fighting, and there's lots of crazy characters with crazy character names, like there's a character named Fae-Fax Faz, which is an insane thing to name a character. There's characters named Lord Juss, Goldry Bluzko, Spitfire, La Ferise, just very strange names, hard to get your head around. But it's all part of this very evocative, dreamlike landscape that he's created. And it's a very epic feeling, very noble feeling. It does remind me a lot of Arthurian legend. And if you're interested in the roots of the fantasy genre and where people like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis got some of their ideas from, this is really an interesting place to start. He apparently wrote other books in the series, sequels, or semi-sequels anyway, to the Worm Ouroboros. I haven't read them, and they are not well regarded critically. They don't seem to have had the impact of this book. One thing I will say about the Worm Ouroboros is it can be a little bit slow and ponderous at times, but it does have that really Arthurian quest-like feel to it. There's all these quests that the characters have to go on, and it will transport you in that sense to a fantasy world. So if you like that sort of thing, I do recommend checking it out. It's certainly educational in terms of the history of the genre, and it's certainly a unique book. I haven't really read any others quite like it, and I will talk about some of the other influences later on. I want to get into George MacDonald because he is certainly his influence is certainly evident in this book. So we'll talk about him later. But for now, that's my recommendation: The Worm Ouroboros, E.R. Eddison. Check it out. I think you won't be disappointed. That's all for me today. I've been Logan Albright. Please, as always, if you enjoyed this video, subscribe to my channel, leave me comments below, and keep on reading. That's my new catchphrase. Keep on reading. Original, isn't it? See you later.